It began in the Philippine Trench, where light has never reached, and pressure crushes steel like paper. A deep-sea drone picked up movement the size of a freight ship, circling slowly beneath the sub. Then came the sound, a low, echoing vibration that shattered every sensor before the feed went dark. When they surfaced, half the crew was gone. The hull was torn open, marked with teeth older than mankind, yet still warm to the touch. The Navy buried the footage, sealed the report, and called it a malfunction. But you can't hide a shadow that big forever, because what they found in the deep didn't evolve. It endured. Beneath the churning Pacific, the Philippine Trench yawns like a scar on the Earth's crust, 7 miles of crushing silence and ancient cold. Down there, sunlight is a myth, and time itself seems to slow, folding in on the darkness. Every sound echoes forever, swallowed and returned by the weight of the abyss. For decades, explorers called it lifeless, a graveyard of pressure and stone. But graves don't move, and something in this one did. The first sign wasn't a sighting, but a pulse, a deep, rhythmic thrum that no machine could explain. It came through sonar like a heartbeat the size of mountains, shaking the ship's hull until the crew felt it in their bones. Scientists thought it was tectonic activity, a fault line grinding miles below. But faults don't move in circles, and this one circled back. The expedition began as a routine mapping mission. A team of oceanographers, divers, and drone engineers, seasoned and confident, sent their probes into the void. Each drone descended farther than the last, its lights fading into the ink below. One by one, their signals winked out, not from malfunction but interference, as if something massive passed between them and the surface, cutting the line like a blade through silk. Hours later, a final drone, the smallest, the most advanced, managed to transmit a single image before its systems failed. It wasn't clear, distorted by pressure and static, but it showed a shadow, long, curved, and impossibly wide. It wasn't the shape of a whale, or any known sea creature. Its outline was smooth, streamlined, built for hunting in total darkness, and it was still moving. The oceanographers replayed the footage in silence, unable to decide what unnerved them more, the creature's size, or the speed with which it vanished. Within seconds, the entire team felt the ship tilt, sensors flickering as something enormous displaced the water below. Then came a sound none of them could identify, a deep, guttural roar that made even the machinery vibrate. The trench wasn't empty, it was awake. Veteran sailors had warned them. Stories of strange currents, vanishing research vessels, and sonar echoes that mimicked a heartbeat. They laughed it off as superstition. But when their equipment began failing one by one, laughter stopped. A cold certainty settled over them, the kind that makes you realize you're being watched by something older, something patient. The trench didn't sleep, because something inside it never did. They decided to drop an acoustic buoy, hoping to record the sounds again. The device sank for hours, sending back data at irregular intervals. Then, abruptly, it stopped, mid-transmission. When they retrieved the buoy days later, the titanium casing was crushed inward, as if bitten. The pressure could explain the damage, but the circular pattern along its shell said otherwise. Those marks weren't random, they were teeth. In the following nights, the ship's crew reported vibrations beneath their bunks, like tremors from deep below. Instruments logged no seismic activity, yet the hull groaned under invisible stress. Something vast moved beneath them, too close to be a current, too intelligent to be a coincidence. A technician swore he saw a flash of light under the water, not reflected from the ship, but emitted from within the trench itself. The captain ordered all external lights shut off, leaving the deck in complete darkness. Only the moon painted the surface silver, calm and deceitful. Below, the abyss stirred. For hours, they waited, breath held, as the sonar scanned the depths. Then, a return signal stronger than any they'd ever recorded. A wall of movement rising toward them. It wasn't just big, it was deliberate. Whatever it was, it knew they were there. The crew scrambled to prepare emergency ascent procedures. Engines roared to life, and for a moment the noise seemed to drive it back. Then, silence. The sonar blanked out, every reading gone. The sea became still again, too still. And in that quiet, something brushed the underside of the ship. A dull, dragging scrape that made steel groan. When it passed, the deck lights flickered, and a massive fin broke the surface before vanishing back into black. They didn't report it immediately. The Navy handled all communications in this zone, and unexplained sightings had a way of disappearing in the bureaucracy. But the scientists took samples from the hull where it had been scraped. What they found froze the lab in disbelief. Fragments of enamel fused into the steel. The composition matched no modern predator. In fact, it didn't match anything less than 3 million years old. Word spread quietly through classified channels. A few dismissed it as contamination. Others, those who had seen the footage, knew better. The ocean had kept its secret longer than humanity had language, and the trench had been its vault. But now the vault was stirring, disturbed by lights, noise, and curiosity. Curiosity that might have woken something meant to remain asleep. Satellite scans showed strange heat signatures rising from the area days after the incident. Not volcanic, not seismic, alive. Like the slow exhale of something ancient stretching beneath the pressure. The Navy ordered the team to return to port, citing instrumental contamination. But the crew knew the truth. You can't contaminate fear, and theirs was clean and absolute. In the following weeks, several vessels reported sonar anomalies near the trench. Signals too strong to be submarines, moving at impossible speeds. When approached, they vanished, leaving only turbulence. Fishermen nearby spoke of water turning black and warm, and of sharks fleeing toward shallower coasts. The ecosystem was shifting, subtly but surely, as if something enormous had reclaimed its territory. Back at base, the mission logs were confiscated, data wiped, interviews sealed. Yet rumors persisted that one of the submersibles retrieved before the blackout carried a single intact frame. It showed an eye, vast, unblinking, and aware. The color was wrong for any known species, pale like stone under moonlight, and around it, smaller shapes scattered, like prey fleeing a god. Years later, those who survived the trench spoke of it in whispers. None returned to sea. They claimed that the ocean sometimes calls back to them in dreams, a slow, echoing pulse beneath their thoughts. A reminder that down there, far below where sunlight dies, the trench still breathes, still waits, still watches. Because the Philippine Trench was never silent. It was listening. The ship's sonar operator was the first to notice it. A low-frequency rumble so deep it blurred the instruments into unreadable static. At first they thought it was feedback, an equipment glitch caused by the trench's crushing depth. But then the sound stabilized, forming a pattern. Rhythmic, deliberate, almost like breathing. The pitch shifted slowly, rising until it mimicked a pulse. A living pulse. The crew gathered around the console, watching the sonar graph climb and dip like a heartbeat gone mad. Each pulse struck with enough force to make the monitor's casing vibrate. The operator tried recalibrating, but the signal only grew stronger, clearer, closer. Then, as if responding to their efforts, a second echo returned, matching their sonar's frequency. The ocean was answering back. Confusion turned to unease. No known creature could replicate a sonar ping so precisely. It was as if something enormous beneath them had learned their frequency and was using it. The returning signal wasn't random. It carried structure, intervals, and unnatural precision. When they slowed their output, the echo slowed too. When they stopped, silence. Then, a single, thunderous reply. The captain ordered all pings halted, but it was too late. The entity below had locked on. A vibration surged up the hull, rattling bolts and lighting panels. Tools slid across the floor, the air thick with a faint metallic hum that seemed to come from everywhere at once. It wasn't just sound now, it was communication. Something in the deep was aware of them and calling out. A drone was deployed, equipped with high-frequency sensors and live audio feeds. As it descended, the noise intensified, distorting into something organic. The frequencies pulsed with irregular intervals, like syllables. Every few seconds, the sonar screamed, a violent burst that made even hardened divers cover their ears. The drone's camera caught nothing but endless black, yet its readings screamed movement all around. At 6,000 meters, the sonar stopped recording. Not because it failed, but because the entire system shut down at once, as though short-circuited from the inside. Backup systems came online seconds later, only to reveal something horrifying. The sonar array had been physically twisted. Not broken, not bitten, twisted, as if by immense torque applied from outside the ship. The deep had replied with force. Back on the surface, the analysis team decoded the sound waves. When played at normal speed, they seemed random, but when slowed down 50 times slower, the pattern formed distinct intervals resembling a vocal sequence. It wasn't mechanical or geological, it was a call, and the most terrifying part was the frequency range, far below human hearing, yet exactly tuned to that of ancient marine predators. Experts on board compared the waveform to historical recordings of large aquatic animals. The match was inconceivable. It resembled the call of a megalodon, a creature supposedly extinct for millions of years. Yet this signal was fresh, recorded only hours ago, resonating from beneath one of Earth's deepest oceanic scars. No simulation or geological anomaly could reproduce such a biological signature. The team's lead biologist refused to accept the finding. He insisted it must be interference, a layering of echoes bouncing between rock formations. But when he ran the data through separate instruments, each returned the same result. The deep sound wasn't bouncing, it was projecting. Something was intentionally amplifying its presence, as if marking territory or issuing a warning. As the ship moved to a safer distance, the sonar began to pick up interference again. Not one signal, but many. Short bursts scattered across miles of ocean floor, all responding to the original call. It was like listening to an ancient conversation carried across the abyss. The realization hit the crew with paralyzing clarity. There wasn't just one signal source down there, there were several. Sleep became impossible. Every few hours, the sonar would pulse again, louder and closer than before. Crew members claimed to feel the sound rather than hear it. A bone-deep vibration that made teeth ache and eyes blur. One night, the pressure sensors spiked as something immense passed directly beneath them. The sonar screamed back once more, almost angry, shaking the ship like thunder underwater. The captain attempted to retreat to shallower water, but the sonar wouldn't quiet. Instead, it tracked them, each ping chasing their location no matter the distance. It wasn't random, it was pursuit. The data suggested the source moved at nearly 60 knots, impossibly fast for any known marine species. Whatever it wasn't just following, it was studying them, mimicking their technology in real time. Then, without warning, the sonar feed burst into a wall of noise, frequencies stacked upon each other until they formed a single deafening scream. Monitors flickered, lights dimmed. Crew members fell to the floor clutching their ears, though the sound wasn't even audible. It was resonating through the metal of the ship, vibrating the vessel itself. The sonar had become the prey. When the noise stopped, every instrument went silent. The ship drifted in eerie calm, the sea deceptively still. The crew exhaled, until a faint echo appeared again, distant but unmistakable. It wasn't their sonar anymore, it was theirs. The same frequency, repeating the same pattern, now coming from every direction around the ship. They were surrounded. A final transmission was recorded before they cut power entirely. In the data logs, one line stood out, a single sonar return shaped like a curve, ending in sharp ridges. When digitally reconstructed, it resembled a jaw. The technicians didn't speak after that. The data was classified, sealed, and forgotten under layers of naval secrecy. But those who heard the sonar's final scream still remember the vibration that never truly stopped. Even years later, when new expeditions venture near the trench, their instruments occasionally capture faint, repeating pulses, too structured to be random, too distant to locate. Some call it the echo of the abyss. Others, more superstitious, say it's a warning to stay away. But for the ones who've heard it firsthand, it's something worse. They say the deep still remembers their signal, and sometimes it answers back. The morning after the sonar event, the crew worked in grim silence. The ocean around them was eerily calm, like a predator holding its breath. They lowered a remotely operated vehicle once more, not to search for movement this time, but to collect debris from the ocean floor. The drone's cameras flickered through darkness until its lights revealed what looked like fragments of metal, and something else, something jagged and pale. When the samples were brought aboard, the deck fell quiet. Among the wreckage lay several curved shards, each the size of a human hand, coated in fine sediment. They weren't stone, and they weren't coral. The biologist brushed one clean and froze. The texture was smooth, dense, and ridged, like enamel. Not just any enamel, but from a predator. The shard was unmistakably a tooth, only broken clean in half. At first, disbelief filled the air. They assumed it was from a whale or a large shark, maybe dragged up from some carcass. But when they measured it, the numbers didn't make sense. The fragment alone suggested a full tooth nearly 8 inches long, double the size of any known great white. The edges were serrated but worn smooth by time, as if they'd been grinding against prey for centuries. Under the microscope, the patterns grew stranger. The enamel structure didn't match any modern species. It was thicker, denser, almost fossilized, but still biologically fresh. The chemist ran tests, expecting ancient calcium signatures. Instead, the readings showed active organic trace elements, meaning the tooth hadn't fossilized at all. It wasn't ancient, it was recent. Something alive had shed it. Panic mixed with fascination. The ship's lead scientist compared the tooth's DNA to archived marine samples. The results came back with a near-perfect match, not to any modern animal, but to Carcharodon's Megalodon, a creature believed extinct for more than 3 million years. The lab fell silent. Even the equipment's hum seemed distant. If the data was real, extinction wasn't the end, it was an oversight. The captain wanted to discard the samples, fearing government seizure or worse, but the scientists insisted on preserving them. They sealed the fragments in reinforced containers and logged everything. Within hours, encrypted messages were sent to naval headquarters requesting immediate analysis support. The reply came swiftly, too swiftly. Secure all materials. Await further instruction. Cease data transmission immediately. By nightfall, a storm rolled in, waves towering over the vessel like walls of liquid glass. Lightning tore through the sky as the crew scrambled to secure equipment. In the chaos, one container slipped, crashing open across the deck. A single tooth rolled free, gleaming wet under the emergency lights. The biologist reached for it and stopped. The edge was slick, not with seawater, but blood, fresh blood. No one could explain it. The wound wasn't human nor animal, but the fluid carried hemoglobin. It shouldn't have been possible for a fossil to bleed. The realization broke whatever calm the crew had left. Some refused to stay on deck. Others swore they saw something vast beneath the waves, circling silently, as if searching for what it had lost. The ocean wasn't done with its offering. By dawn, the storm cleared, but tension remained. When the researchers reviewed the drone footage again, they discovered a new image, something the ROV had caught just before ascending. A shape gliding through the sediment, leaving trails of disturbed sand in its wake. Its outline was unmistakable. The head of a colossal shark, its mouth half open, revealing empty sockets where several teeth were missing. The Navy vessel dispatched to collect the samples arrived within hours. Men in black uniforms boarded the ship, confiscating data drives and containers without explanation. The lead scientist protested, demanding access to his research, but one officer silenced him with a simple phrase, "This never happened." Within minutes, every record of the discovery was gone, except for one tooth, hidden deep within a storage locker. That night, the scientist couldn't sleep. The tooth lay beside him under dim light, gleaming like ivory laced with shadow. He noticed faint etching on its surface. Not natural wear, but markings, symmetrical grooves that looked almost deliberate. Were they scars from prey, or something else? He couldn't say. But one thing was certain, this tooth had lived through something far older and more violent than human history. He smuggled the fragment off the ship when they docked, keeping it hidden from the authorities. Weeks later, he brought it to an independent lab under a false name. The technicians there confirmed everything: density, DNA, composition. But they found something new: microscopic microorganisms alive within the enamel grooves, feeding on trace organic residue. The tooth wasn't dead matter, it was alive. The news never reached publication. The lab burned down 3 days after the tests were completed, cause officially electrical malfunction. The scientist disappeared shortly after. His house left empty, computer wiped clean. Only a single flash drive was recovered months later from a black market auction, containing one cryptic line of data: sample not fossilized, predator still active. Decades later, divers exploring the same trench recovered a rusted metal fragment lodged in coral. Embedded in it was another tooth, pristine, white, and glinting under artificial light. Analysis revealed the same composition as the original. The ocean had returned what the Navy tried to bury. Whatever lived down there had grown larger, stronger, and closer to the surface. Some believe the teeth are warnings, trophies shed by an apex that no longer fears discovery. Others think it's curiosity, a sign that the creature is watching, learning, adapting. Whatever the reason, the evidence remains undeniable. These aren't relics of an age long gone, they are proof of endurance. A species too ancient to die, too powerful to forget, and too intelligent to forgive. And deep beneath the Philippine Trench, something sharp gleams in the dark, waiting, remembering the hands that dared to take what was its own. The Navy's silence was absolute. Every message, every report, every log from the expedition vanished into encrypted archives that no one outside the chain of command could access. The surviving crew were separated, debriefed, and sworn to secrecy under threats that felt colder than the trench itself. What had begun as a scientific mission had turned into a ghost story wrapped in classified ink. Yet whispers have a way of surviving even when men do not. One by one, those who returned from the Philippine Trench began to change. Some refused to sleep, haunted by sounds only they could hear. A low pulse, faint but constant, echoing through their skulls like an ocean heartbeat. Others claimed to see movement in reflections, shapes gliding across mirrors or glass, as though the sea had followed them home. They called it stress, trauma, decompression sickness. But the doctors couldn't explain the salt water found crystallized in their blood. The ship itself didn't fare better. When engineers examined the hull, they found gouges too deep and symmetrical to be from pressure damage. Whatever had touched the vessel did so with precision, as if testing its strength. The marks ran along the lower decks like fingerprints, each ridge large enough to belong to something the size of a building. One diver said he felt watched even after surfacing, as if the trench had eyes that never blinked. When investigators tried to reconstruct what happened, they discovered large gaps in the data logs. Audio files cut off mid-sentence. Video frames frozen, then overwritten by static. Entire hours of sonar records gone, replaced with nothing but faint, rhythmic interference. The official explanation was corruption during transmission. But how does a signal erase only what proves it existed? One of the divers, racked by guilt and fear, broke the silence first. In a recorded statement, his voice shook as he described what he saw in the final dive. A shadow moving beneath the lights, so massive it looked like the seafloor rising. Then he claimed something brushed the submersible, gentle but heavy, like the sea itself breathing against us. Minutes later, the rest of the footage cut to black. After that confession, the diver disappeared. His apartment was found abandoned, lights still on, dinner half-eaten. In his notebook, investigators found a single phrase repeated across several pages. "It's still calling." The handwriting grew more erratic with each line until it trailed off completely, as if interrupted mid-thought. The Navy closed the case, ruling it a voluntary disappearance. But his neighbors swore they heard ocean sounds coming from his apartment at night. Meanwhile, oceanic sensors across the Pacific began picking up irregular tremors, not earthquakes, but deep, rhythmic vibrations. They aligned almost perfectly with the same frequency captured by the ship's sonar months earlier. The readings would last minutes, then vanish, like something testing the boundaries of its cage. Seismologists dismissed them as equipment malfunctions. But deep-sea experts knew better. The pattern wasn't random. It was repetition. A retired admiral, once involved in the mission, later hinted at something disturbing during an off-record interview. He spoke of classified losses, research subs that vanished during follow-up dives. No wreckage, no distress calls, just silence. The recovery teams found fragments of steel miles apart, edges folded inward as if crushed by immense force. "We didn't lose ships," he said softly. "The ocean took them." Rumors spread among naval personnel of ghost coordinates, regions marked off the maps, places where compasses spun and sonar screamed. Some said the coordinates aligned with where the Megalodon signals were last heard. Others claimed the Navy was running containment operations, not research. A few even whispered that something had followed their vessels home, tracking their frequencies across the open sea. Years passed, but the survivors couldn't escape the memories. One crewman, now old and frail, confessed on his deathbed that he still dreamed of the trench, of lights flickering through endless black water, and of a shadow circling just beyond the glow. "It wasn't hunting," he murmured. "It was remembering." He died that night, salt crusted on his fingertips, though he hadn't touched the sea in decades. The original ship, the Valiant Horizon, was decommissioned soon after. Rumor said its hull sang faintly at night, vibrations too low for most to hear, but strong enough to shake the air. Workers reported tools vanishing, echoing thuds from empty decks, and once, a splash, though the vessel sat dry in dock. Engineers blamed structural fatigue. The older sailors just called it the trench whisper. When the Navy tried to tow the ship for dismantling, their tugboats experienced power failures one after another. As dawn broke, the vessel was found adrift miles away, rusted chains snapped clean as though bitten. It was the last time the Valiant Horizon was seen. Satellite imagery showed it drifting toward the same coordinates where the first encounter began, then disappearing beneath a storm. No wreckage was ever recovered. In the years that followed, entire archives related to the expedition vanished from government databases. Even mention of the project name was scrubbed. The only surviving records were whispers among those who had been there, stories exchanged in bars and midnight meetings. They said the ocean doesn't just erase ships, it erases memories, rewrites them, absorbs them into itself like the tide reclaiming a footprint. Some say the trench has a will of its own, that it doesn't just swallow men, but their history. Evidence decays, witnesses vanish, records distort until only fragments remain, impossible to prove. Maybe that's how it keeps its secret, not through violence, but through forgetfulness, an endless living void that consumes both flesh and truth. The deep doesn't destroy, it absorbs. And yet in every story, one detail never changes: the sound. That low, resonant pulse that started it all. It still echoes across sonar feeds, faint but persistent, as if marking the graves of those who dared to listen. Scientists dismiss it as coincidence, a lingering anomaly, but those who've heard it before know the truth. The deep hasn't forgotten. It's just waiting for someone else to remember. Because what the ocean takes, it never truly buries. It keeps. It watches, it waits. And in the trench that never sleeps, even memory is prey. Long before humans sailed the oceans, it ruled them. Its instincts were older than continents, its hunger written into the bones of the sea. Evolution had carved perfection from predation, senses tuned to vibration, movement, and memory. The Megalodon had outlived ice ages, meteor strikes, and extinction itself by learning one thing the world never understood: patience. And now, for the first time in millennia, something had woken it from that quiet sleep. The scientists once believed it hunted only for food. But predators that survive epochs do not feed on hunger alone, they feed on intrusion. When sonar pulses pierced the trench, it wasn't curiosity that drew it upward, but recognition. The rhythm was familiar, the cadence like the echo of its own calls from ages past. Humanity's machines had spoken in its language, and the ocean had answered. In the days after the disappearance of the Valiant Horizon, strange sightings spread across trade routes. Cargo captains reported waves breaking against calm seas, shadows passing beneath ships longer than their entire hulls. Black box recordings captured faint, rhythmic pulses, followed by screams cut short and static, drowned in a rising roar. Each time, the Navy sealed the reports before they reached the press. Marine biologists studying whale migrations noticed something unnatural. Entire pods had shifted course, avoiding the Philippine Trench completely. Apex predators do not yield territory lightly, unless something greater claims it. The ocean's balance had shifted, quietly but decisively. The deep was reorganizing itself around an ancient presence, returning to dominance. One research sub off Guam captured what it thought was a blue whale on thermal imaging, but as the object turned, the heat signature fractured, multiple layers of muscle and movement, thicker than any known mammal. Then a mouth opened wider than the sub itself, releasing a shockwave of bubbles before the feed collapsed. When the footage resurfaced days later, the timestamp was corrupted, as if time itself had distorted under pressure. Those who examined the surviving sonar data saw a haunting detail. The creature's approach pattern was calculated. It didn't strike immediately. It circled, mapped, and then attacked from below, precisely where the ship's blind spot was. That wasn't instinct. It was strategy. The predator wasn't reacting. It was remembering, recognizing the design, the frequency, even the metallic hum of the hull that once escaped it. Some theorized that the Megalodon's brain, though massive, wasn't primitive at all. Its structure allowed it to store sensory information across generations, a living archive of encounters passed through chemical memory. When human technology echoed into its world, it remembered the last time the surface disturbed the abyss, centuries ago, when whaling ships spilled blood that reached the deep. To it, the smell of oil and steel was the scent of intrusion. Naval archives declassified decades later mentioned Target Omega, a cryptic term describing an unidentified biological entity capable of strategic evasion. The files reference multiple sonar contacts between 1978 and 1993, each followed by unexplained disappearances. One annotation reads simply, "Intelligence presumed. Response, deterrence, ineffective. Deterrence against what? No one ever clarified." A civilian diver off Palau swore he encountered it firsthand. He described a current pulling against him, warm and alive, followed by a flash of pale underbelly the size of a canyon wall. What struck him most wasn't the size, but the eye, not cold or mindless, but aware, focused, unblinking. It didn't attack, he said, it just watched, as if waiting for me to understand I didn't belong there. In coastal villages along the Pacific Rim, fishermen began to tell new stories that sounded like ancient ones reborn, nets torn to shreds, whales washing ashore without heads, deep vibrations that made the water in glass bowls ripple at night. The elders called it the sea's memory, a spirit that awakens when the surface grows arrogant. Science dismissed it as folklore, but folklore has a way of surviving when evidence is buried. Meanwhile, the Navy continued quiet patrols over the trench. Submarines equipped with classified acoustic arrays were deployed and never resurfaced. Families received empty coffins wrapped in ceremony. One leaked memo suggested the final transmissions contained the same pattern of sonar mimicry first recorded decades earlier, except now, the pulse was stronger, layered with what analysts described as intent. Experts tried to rationalize it. Maybe sonar pings had disturbed sleeping colonies of unknown creatures. Maybe the so-called teeth were remnants from prehistoric carcasses released by tectonic shifts, but reason withered in the face of repetition. Each new expedition ended the same way, signals rising, data vanishing, witnesses silenced. The predator was no longer hiding, it was listening. Those who once studied it began to realize they had become part of its ecosystem, the intruders it adapted to, catalogued, and perhaps even tolerated. Until the balance tipped, reports surfaced of ghost wakes moving against the current, of submarines forced to surface by unseen pressure waves. Every sign pointed to something vast asserting control, not out of hunger, but out of recognition. The predator remembered who disturbed its domain. Late one night, a private research crew anchored miles from the trench recorded the last clear visual ever captured. A shadow glided beneath their vessel, followed by a slow, deliberate rise. As its dorsal fin broke the surface, the water around it sank inward, as if the ocean bowed to it. The crew stared in silence until the creature slipped back into darkness. Only one line was written in their log: "It looked at us." Since then, sonar arrays across the Pacific occasionally pick up a familiar frequency. The same pulse that answered the valiant horizon long ago. It comes and goes, never staying long enough to trace. But it always returns, steady and patient, like a reminder from the deep. The Navy no longer calls it an anomaly. In private circles, they use a different name now. *, the remembering. Because predators forget nothing. They evolve through memory, through time, through vengeance wrapped in silence. And somewhere beneath miles of black water, the Megalodon drifts through eternity, not extinct, not lost, just waiting for the next sound that dares to call its name. They say the ocean keeps its secrets because it has nowhere else to put them. Every wreck, every body, every whisper of what humanity has tried to forget, it all sinks to the same dark place. But some secrets are not buried, they are guarded. What slept beneath the Philippine Trench wasn't lost to time. It was protected by it, waiting for the world to become arrogant enough to look again. After the final classified expeditions, the Navy sealed off the region entirely. No fly zones appeared on maps. Civilian routes were diverted, and satellite imagery went permanently blurred over that stretch of the Pacific. They said it was due to seismic instability. But those who'd seen the sonar records knew better. The instability wasn't geological. It was alive, moving beneath the crust like muscle under skin. Deep-sea communication buoys stationed near the trench began transmitting odd data, sudden bursts of heat signatures in patterns too regular to be random. Each time the readings would spike, then vanish, as if something enormous had passed by. Divers sent to recover damaged buoys found them shredded, cables twisted around themselves like vines crushed in a fist. The sea had started rejecting observation. Oceanographers studying migratory data noticed a void, a dead zone spreading outward from the trench. Marine life avoided it completely. Sharks, whales, and even plankton altered course, as if obeying an ancient command. It was as though the ocean itself had redrawn its boundaries, marking a domain that didn't belong to man or nature. Something had reclaimed its throne, and everything else simply obeyed. The surviving scientists from the valiant horizon gathered one last time, decades after their ordeal. They spoke in hushed tones, aging faces pale with the same dread they'd carried since that night. One of them revealed a recording never turned over to the Navy, a final sonar capture, long forgotten. When played, the room filled with that familiar low-frequency pulse. But this time, there were others, layered, distant, countless. It wasn't one creature anymore, it was a chorus. The implications shattered what remained of scientific logic. A single megalodon surviving extinction was improbable. An entire population hidden beneath human history, impossible. And yet, the evidence throbbed through the speakers like a heartbeat the size of continents. The ocean's silence had never meant emptiness. It had meant dominion, a kingdom undisturbed beneath the noise of human arrogance. Soon after, one of those scientists was found dead in his apartment, lungs filled with salt water, though he'd drowned nowhere near the sea. The recording disappeared from the archives that same week. The few who knew of its existence agreed never to play it again. Whatever had called from the trench was still listening, and perhaps it didn't like being remembered. Satellite oceanography showed new thermal patterns emerging far beyond the trench, stretching in lines toward continental shelves. It was movement, deliberate and slow, like migration. No seismic cause, no mechanical explanation. Just warmth blooming in the coldest parts of the ocean, tracing invisible paths toward populated coastlines. The old balance was shifting again, and the sea was preparing for something. Meanwhile, rumors surfaced among coastal naval bases of massive sonar echoes traveling parallel to submarines without detection. A captain claimed his vessel's instruments failed entirely, replaced by a single word across the diagnostics screen: return. They laughed at him in the press, but his ship was decommissioned weeks later without explanation. The rest of his crew refused to speak at all. In remote oceanic labs, independent researchers began comparing the recorded pulses over the decades. The chilling discovery: the signals had evolved. The pitch was slightly higher, the frequency more structured. It wasn't random evolution, it was adaptation, the deep adjusting to human interference. Whatever lived below was not just surviving, it was learning. Some believe the Megalodon wasn't a single species, but the remnant of something older, a predator that predated sharks themselves, the ocean's first design, perfected and preserved by pressure and darkness, a being older than extinction, older than fear. And in its long sleep, it had watched the world above change, only to find its seas invaded by engines and noise. The ocean had remembered what it once was, and the creature was its messenger. As the world's governments quietly expanded deep-sea military budgets, satellite data became increasingly censored. Civilian access to oceanic thermal scans was cut off. Deep water exploration programs abruptly reprioritized. When questioned, officials offered no answers, only reassurances that the ocean was under study. But what they were studying wasn't geology or climate. It was awakening. A decade later, a rogue transmission was intercepted near the trench. A robotic exploration drone sent by a private team managed to transmit only 4 seconds of video before going offline. In the footage, a shadow passed, not swiftly but gracefully, as if inspecting the camera itself. Then came the eye. Massive, amber, calm. It blinked once, and the feed died. The timestamp read exactly midnight. No one knows how deep the Philippine Trench truly goes. Some say it reaches beyond the crust, into ancient fractures from when the planet was still molten. Others whisper that it's not just a hole in the earth, but a wound, a doorway to something that never stopped breathing beneath it. The sea doesn't give up its oldest secrets. It only decides when you're ready to hear them. And maybe that's the real terror. Not that the Megalodon survived, but that it was never alone. The sonar still hums in classified archives, its rhythm echoing through decades like the ticking of a clock counting down. Because if the ocean remembers, then one day it will return what it's kept. And when that happens, we won't be explorers anymore. We'll be prey, rediscovered by the ocean's oldest secret. The ocean has always been a mirror, reflecting back the truth of what we dare to seek. We sent machines into its heart, searching for knowledge, for proof that humanity could map even the impossible. But beneath miles of black water, we didn't yet find the end of extinction. We found the beginning of memory. Because some things don't die, they wait. They remember the sound of our ships, the tremor of our engines, and the taste of our light breaking the dark. The Navy buried the evidence. The reports were sealed. But you can't erase the ocean's witness. Every current, every echo still carries what we tried to hide. Whales still vanish near the trench. Deep-sea sensors still pick up the same pulse we recorded decades ago, steady, deliberate, alive. And every so often, a signal returns from the deep, as if asking a question humanity doesn't want to answer. Maybe the Megalodon isn't set just a creature. Maybe it sets the ocean-set's reminder that for all our progress, all our power, we are still guests on a planet of water. We build machines to explore it, but we've never truly belonged to it. Because the sea was never ours to conquer, it was ours to fear. And fear, like the deep, endures. So when you hear the waves crash against the shore, listen closely. Beneath that rhythm, there's another, slower, older, a heartbeat that has never stopped since the first dawn, the same one we mistook for silence. The ocean hasn't yet forgotten what we found. When the surface grows too loud again, it might rise to remind us, extinction was never the end.